and thank you for attending today's webinar. My name is Hattie King. I am a marketing specialist with the customer and third-party risk business at Refinitiv. I will be your webinar host today. Before we begin, I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. So first of all, there isn't a dial-in number for audio. The webcast is being streamed through your computer, so please make sure that your computer speakers or your headsets are turned on and the volume is turned up. If your screen freezes, simply refresh your browser. Click the live stream or media player on your screen to enable the sound. You can adjust the window size or maximize to full screen on your console by clicking on the arrow in the top right corner of the window. Submit your questions in the Q&A box. Our presenters will be answering as many of these questions as they can during the last 5 to 10 minutes of the webcast. Finally, answers to some technical issues can be found by clicking the Help widget, which is the question mark icon in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, and a copy of the slides and a link to the webinar recording will be shared after the conclusion of the webinar. Our presenters today are Andrew Henderson, Director of Due Diligence Proposition at Refinitiv, and Nick Bellani, Due Diligence Transformation Manager at Refinitiv. We have a lot to cover today, so I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to get the presentation underway. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Hattie. Welcome, everyone, to the presentation today. What we want to cover today is really the Refinitiv KYC products and solutions. We've updated quite a lot of the solutions that we have, and we want to sort of take you through those today and how they all fit together. So I'll cover the first part, which is really the big picture, and then my colleague Nick Bellani will take you more into the detail of the KYC due diligence reports that we are offering and how they fit into a broader KYC AML program. First of all, before we start, I suppose some background. I myself came from a company called the Red Flag Group, which was acquired by Refinitiv in October last year. And as a business, as a combined business, a lot of the work that we're doing, especially around the due diligence space, is to come out with a better product set that makes the best use of the two legacy companies. The first area where we're really focusing on is on the data itself. Refinitiv was very much a data company, and we're continuing to use the breadth of data that Refinitiv has, and working with a number of partners to get further content into our due diligence reports. In terms of the content that we provide, the basis of a lot of our reports is our World Check data, which was a Refinitiv product for many years, and I believe many of you on the call today will be happily using World Check. But Refinitiv also has a significant amount of financial data within the ICON platform and in other data sets. And we're working with companies such as BitSight and CreditSafe to really get further data for our clients around niche risk areas such as cybersecurity and credit. And Nick will take us through some of those areas in more detail as we get into the products themselves. As a business, we're heavily involved in the KYC space, especially from the screening aspect, again, the World Check screening aspect. But we do a significant amount of work around the enhanced due diligence in KYC, and we'll sort of take you through how we're working to improve that in the future. The other aspect, which again Nick will take you through, is the ability to deliver ratings on the data. So we're wanting to move the work that we do away from just delivering raw information, and to take that raw information and provide much more analysis and insight for clients as to what it all means. So provide context through our ratings. So this is a new feature. It doesn't necessarily have to be used by everyone. Many of our KYC clients certainly have their own rating scheme, but it's where we want us to go, is to provide more data and the ability to use that data in more ways. We also have a number of solutions, and I'll take you briefly through sort of the breadth of the solutions that we have for KYC, and where possibly those solutions can fit into the needs that you might have. And lastly, we're doing a lot of work on automation and methods of both ingesting data more efficiently and better, and delivering it to clients. So again, I'll take you through some of the work that we're doing on that, because that all fits together in the broad solution of what we're trying to deliver for clients, which is making KYC as easy a process as possible, given the regulatory need to do the process, to make it as simple and easy as possible. So that's really what we want to cover in the big picture today. In terms of the solutions that Refinitiv has, we have a number of products and services within the KYC space. We have professional services that can help clients actually build the AML and the terrorist financing programs that they need to do, along with other programs that banks and financial services might need around their third parties or around their investments. But today we're going to focus very much on the KYC aspect. We have an onboarding platform, so for clients that don't have their own sort of inbuilt workflow platform, we can offer that. We obviously have the WorldCheck Risk Intelligence database, which many of you are already well aware of, but that's a screening database very much targeted around the KYC and financial crime use case. We have country risk ratings, so we have information to help clients do that risk assessment piece about what type of risks are available or prevalent in various countries. And then we also have a managed services option, so we can help clients actually either do some of the screening ourselves or do onboarding, so using our platforms to actually not necessarily automate the process, but using an outsourced function to Refinitiv to do that more administrative work. So those are a whole sort of group of products and services that we have. But what we want to talk to today is really the due diligence report. So that's sometimes known as enhanced due diligence. We call it Refinitiv risk due diligence. But that's where we do a far deeper dive review of entities or people that you're wanting to do work with. We, as a business, cover a number of use cases for that. Things like third-party risk, pre-investment risk, which might be M&A activity or investment buy side, or pre-IPO kind of work. We also do investment migration, which is a sort of a niche area. But today it's very much focusing on know your customer, the risks involved in bringing a customer into your world, and mainly the regulatory risks, but beyond that, reputational risks. So that's what we as a business cover. We also want to talk a bit about where we're going into the future. Today for the KYC use case. Today we're very much focused on the reports themselves. So Nick will take us through in more detail what those reports contain. But there's a lot more work that we're delivering over the next half a year and into next year to really automate that process. So making it easier to order reports, directly sort of linking up our WorldCheck database with the reports that we generate, delivering those reports back to clients in an online format rather than documents. So we're wanting to move away from documents, and except for those who want to retain them and keep them. But also, I think the end point is getting to or structured data that clients can ingest into their own systems in many different ways. And that's why the new reports that we're going to talk to today are really that first step in that process, because the way we generate those reports has changed significantly. We're no longer writing Word documents. We're now writing into a structured data set, which gives us the ability to do much more with that data. So some of what Nick will take you through is very much about the changes we're making now to mean that we can actually deliver the structured data to clients to automate and improve their KYC processes. Okay, so just before we start and I hand over to Nick, we've got a poll question, just to set the scene of where you are. So if we can run that poll and give you about a minute to answer that. Hattie, can you start that?
Yep, that started. So listeners, you just will need to select your option, and then in about 30 seconds, Andrew will go to the next page and it will show the results.
Yeah. So just taking through the question, I mean, it's basically a starting point of how you currently run KYC. For some, it's an internal business. You've got your own teams that run the process. Some, it's a mixture of internal and external, using vendors such as Refinitiv for some or all of that process. Some, it's all external. And for others, they don't have a KYC process for various reasons. So if you can take a minute or so and answer those, that just gets us a good assessment of where we are. Okay, I think if we ended there, we'll have a quick look at the results. Okay, so as expected, a very large percentage, probably almost half, have it as a completely internal function. And I think that's our experience too. Often where it is almost completely internal, we're often asked to do the edge cases for clients. That might be where there's either a backlog project which exceeds the capacity internally, or highly complex or multi-jurisdictional work, which is outside the scope of the internal teams. But the other big group is where there's a mixture of internal and external, and again, that's where we're often involved. All external is actually quite rare. We don't see that ourselves. We do that for very few clients where we sort of run it as a service, but most of our financial services clients certainly have that functionality internally. And then there's a significant percentage that don't do it at all. There could be many reasons for that. Maybe you're not actually running a financial service business yourself. You're more an advisor. Okay, well, thank you very much for that start. And now I will hand over to Nick, and he will take us through the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Andrew. So how we'd like to start this with the fact that KYC has been around for quite some time. So we have quite a knowledgeable audience. We're all here because of a regulatory obligation to some extent. So we're just going to delve quickly into the challenges and how we at Refinitiv are evolving to sort those challenges or bring solutions to those challenges more quickly. So these kind of the obvious challenges to most folks are regulatory noncompliance for KYC. Due to ever-increasing and ever-changing regulation, this has become more and more obvious as the years go on and as they expand the kind of national security aperture around AML KYC. In the U.S., that was with the National Security Bill in December of 2020, and we've yet to see that kind of be more formalized in regulation that is coming down the path. Further, with regulatory noncompliance, the need for proofs, the need for an audit trail, the need for documented, arguably ever-expanding programs with proper escalation procedures, as well as immediate responses and contingency plans. I think we're all well aware from watching the news and just from being in this industry that fines from regulators we hear every few weeks around financial institutions, as well as some other kind of companies that are now covered businesses for regulation, and there's obvious reputational damage that goes along with that. Operational inefficiency. Huge challenge for KYC, given it is, that regulatory requirement. You have to deal internally with budgets and resources to make sure it's scalable, which, technology is the key to scalability. We also have siloed and fragmented data and systems. This can be viewed on different, kind of attached to the next bullet, where you have, different data in different jurisdictions for different businesses and individuals. Not to mention for larger organizations, how if there's a non-centralized or compliance function, it can be more kind of siloed, fragmented among, business functions, teams, depending on how you structure your kind of enterprise risk. And last but not least, kind of lack of expertise and knowledge to understand the full extent and true risk exposures. Now, granted, risk is constantly growing and evolving, as well as regulation is arguably lagging but trying to catch up. So this can lead to a variety of kind of consequences, specifically operational disruptions, and lack of an updated application of the risk-based approach. As for legal action, this is obvious to most of us for AML non-compliance enforcement actions, fines, sanctions. For public companies or those with shareholders, it can lead to lawsuits from shareholders against the company, and just pending kind of civil litigation and other lawsuits. Now, when certain cases have come forth where there's been actually some attribution of criminal negligence, so that's becoming something where I guess stakeholders are being held more accountable for their actions or for their inaction, depending on what occurred, how it occurred. So consequences around this are quite obvious as well for legal costs, lawsuit settlements, and reputational damage. Andrew alluded to the goal at Refinitiv as we evolve our due diligence program, and that is, what does due diligence mean and how does it apply to you, or how does it apply to your use case? So the way we're further contextualizing risk is by building out what you're looking at here, which is effectively a risk taxonomy. We have 6 risk categories, and there's about 29 or so underlying risk vectors that map up to these categories. The idea here is to provide that risk context by taking to be quite source-driven information from due diligence. What also used to be, if we identified litigation, well, here's your litigation. Here's what what do you do with it? If we identified, an enforcement action, here's your enforcement action. If we identified negative media around corruption and bribery, it's typically source first. The idea with the risk taxonomy, how we want to further contextualize this and make it easier to digest, is actually looking at those due diligence data points, looking at how to assess those risks and map them to the actual risk taxonomy, which will then provide you with a kind of ready reference view in terms of what the findings were. So for the KYC use case specifically, as Andrew said, we have use cases for 3PR and for building out use cases this year for new products. We decided to break them into core and emerging risks. Now for KYC, the core risks are integrity risks, which might be obvious in terms of what you need to do and what it pertains to. It pertains to corruption, bribery, serious and organized crime, counter-terrorist financing, anti-competitive behavior, fraud, government connection, sanctions, PEPs. So quite obvious, and it speaks to the name integrity risks. And what you need to do in a KYC use case is verify the customer is not, first and foremost, not subject to any government sanctions, watch lists, and anything that would partially or completely inhibit a commercial relationship. You also need to verify the customers are not effectively bad actors, or could be potentially exploiting, you as their provider for their illicit gain, for money laundering or terrorist financing, as well as identifying and addressing any integrity issues generally, and any potential reputational impact. Now, the way we look at reputational impact, it's reverberations out there in media and whatnot, but reputational impact quickly can then formalize legal proceedings to regulatory action. So it's definitely reverberations in the reputational space. Whether it's a commercial implication, can quickly solidify to regulatory or legal implication, and therefore become a commercial implication as well. Identity risks, one of our other core KYC risks, quite obvious. It's about transparency and source of wealth and just verification of someone's identity, verifying that customer exists, whether that's independent validation of their identity through third-party resources or third-party sources rather, so it's that independent cooperation. Also verifying that the customer is the actual customer, not a pass-through or an intermediary of some sort, and also assessing the viability of that customer, understanding who they are, what they are, if they're client-worthy, or if things just don't necessarily add up with what they claim, who they claim to be, especially when they provide you with their KYC documentation. Another core risk we consider in the KYC use case is financial risk. That's financial stability, financial irregularities. and what you effectively need to know around these risks specifically, assessing creditworthiness of a customer, assessing financial stability, and overall this attributes to, customer worthiness. An example of this, which is obvious probably to most people, is a customer's inconsistent credit score trend to counter their public claims of sustained growth and profitability, or a customer with a credit score that trends consistently below comparisons against the industry, despite claims otherwise, or documentation that's self-provided otherwise. Now, how that would necessarily look in our reports is, as Andrew alluded to, we have data partnerships with credit providers such as CreditSafe, which provides credit scores baked into our reports, also provides credit trends so you can see that straight. That is obvious to you, credit trend over X amount of years to see the financial performance from a high-level view of the company. When we're looking at KYC as well, we're looking at emerging risks in that space as well. The operational risk of a company actually quite directly correlates and reinforces identity and integrity risks and our core risks that we're initially speaking of. So operational risk pertains to their industry presence, who they are versus who they say they are, what their operational footprint is, their customer, the client base, the jurisdictions they operate in. It also pertains to the quality of their business and their products and services, as well as business continuity. It's just to get an idea of how this company is functioning, if it aligns with the documentation they're providing, the kind of image they're portraying, and if it also aligns with your financial risk, your integrity risk, and your identity risks. So specifically with operational risk, as the KYC regulatory aperture expands to that national security kind of concern, we're also looking at misuse of client products or kind of in the U.S. the CFIUS-related concerns around national security and 5G, or the use of data in certain products, and these things that are slowly being enveloped by the kind of national security concerns that's pinned to AML KYC procedures. Our last two risks of the top kind of six everything maps up to, also emerging risks, are ESG, which is also the kind of the evolution of CSR. So this is anything within environmental degradation, animal welfare, sales and marketing practices, anything effectively that is within that ESG canon, and that can pose significant reputational issues, which can evolve or devolve, if you will, to potential legal and regulatory risks. So examples of this are identifying controversies across bank loan books for securitization purposes. A lot of investment firms, a lot of banks, actually most have ESG purpose statements out there about how they want to invest and where they want to invest. So definitely something that's not actually emerging. It's pretty much here. And another example is unknowingly facilitating illicit financial transactions related to modern slavery, or facilitating payment systems unknowingly, of course, as you're being exploited by your client, but that can pose an ESG risk. Cyber and data risks is also characterized as another emerging risk, which pertains to personal and data privacy, intellectual property, data security, data hygiene in general. So this emerging risk pertains, it's more so emerging within the KYC space. Certain agencies are starting to release more and more certifications around cyber risk, like DFS in New York. And I'm sure it will there's a long slog towards regulation that I think cyber will quickly take, given the cyber attacks recently. But how does this pertain to KYC while it's an emerging risk? It's identifying intellectual property disputes of a client, potential theft accusations, which could lead to sanctions, potential insolvency, a variety of issues if a customer's actions are realized, nefarious actions rather, they materialize into actual sanctions or something to that extent. Also with, technological integration with clients, although they're downstream, it could still pose a cyber risk that's worth addressing, even from a high-level view, like we offer with our partner BitSite and the BitSite kind of cyber risk ratings within our reports. So moving on to what Refinitiv can effectively offer, we won't spend a whole lot of time on this slide, but Refinitiv has a suite of risk solutions, particular to KYC, that can address almost every step in the risk process and is actually quite scalable to your risk appetite to what you determine is necessary for your client onboarding process, your risk assessment, your screening, and further verification through due diligence. Obviously, we have WorldCheck, which is quite ubiquitous in the KYC space, but we also have our country risk rating, our RDD snapshot reports, which is like an introductory due diligence report that can be turned around in hours on a single individual or a single company, as well as our deeper dive KYC due diligence reports, which we'll be delving into further today, due to how we've revamped them. What is not listed here, but we are working on and should soon be out. We're working on an end-to-end KYC platform for client onboarding, which is another kind of tech advancement that we're adding to our suite of tools for kind of an end-to-end risk solution for KYC. Delving into the reports. Now, how we built this product set out was to specifically vet two groups of KYC clients, which might be obvious. KYC companies, so delving into those entities, and KYC individuals. So we built the reports in such a way to provide targeted research that contextualize risks specific to KYC, to provide those ready reference kind of risk and regulatory insights on the cover page. The idea is to have one place to go to in the report, have that synthesized view, and then you have the remainder of the report for reference when and if you need it. We've also built these reports in such a way so they're customizable, meaning we have our baseline reports. You have add-ons so you can scale up accordingly if you would like. And we also provide a range of levels, so you can pick a level that's commensurate with your risk appetite with that particular client or customer you are onboarding. So as we delve into this, we'll demonstrate the KYC company reports. They're the more traditional, robust reports that provide the full risk context plus the regulatory requirements and a pretty robust cover page. And those are the reports that most folks are used to. We have a KYC entity report, which is a little more kind of targeted and effectively is looking to ensure transparency and understanding entity structure and ownership. So that's digging into company background, UBOs, senior management officials, and doing a quick WorldCheck screen or a global compliance check, just to kind of target those regulatory requirements specifically. Also, for the KYC individuals, we've completely revamped our source of wealth assessments, which effectively determine wealth generation, so how an individual has accumulated wealth over time, and if it comes from legitimate means or potentially illicit financial means, whether that is stemmed from family or from some other aspect of their financial profile, which is particularly pertinent for KYC procedures in casinos as well as investment side in terms of raising funds and whatnot. So to delve into what our reports look like, you're effectively looking at our new report. It's a KYC company premium level report. So this is the top report you can buy for a KYC company. It includes basically every piece of data we have included in this report, every risk, and then topped off with business intelligence. So our goal with this cover page and what you're looking at right now is to consolidate those risk and regulatory requirements into a clear and concise cover page. That cover page consists of an overall risk rating, as you're seeing in the upper right-hand corner of the report. We still include an executive summary, which will give you background on the actual subject company in terms of what they do when they were established and any glaring risks. We also have our proprietary risk table. So this table presents the 6 risks we spoke of earlier: identity, integrity, financial, operational, cyber, and ESG, and then also demonstrates the underlying risk categories. If you look closely at this cover page, you'll see that there's literal colors and numerical ratings for each underlying risk vector that applies to its category. And that gives you an idea of what risks you're facing from a potential client or an existing client then and there on the cover page. Also on top of the table, you'll see the literal kind of risk color bar, effectively going from 1 to 10, presenting higher risk to lower risk on that client. On the cover page within the KYC use case, we've also included an association summary, which lists out the ultimate beneficial owners and the controllers of the company, so the C-suite individuals. As you'll see in the chart in the lower right-hand corner, We quite literally list out the individuals, their role. So if they're a CEO, if they're a director, or potential UBO. And then we have an ownership and control column. Now designated by a key and or gear wheel, the key demonstrates ownership if they're a UBO or shareholder. The gear represents control if they're a C-suite individual or director of some sort. The last column is risk identified, whether they were one of the key principals included in the scope of the report or they were an associated individual pulled into the report through the UBO process. They're screened via World Check, and if they're a key principal, they obviously have the more in-depth screening per the scope of the report. Last but not least, on the cover page, on the left-hand lower left-hand corner, we have the country risk rating, which is basically for that country. That in this case, the sample company we have here is from South Africa, so we provide South Africa's risk ratings aligned with our risk taxonomy as well. Just to point out, a lot of KYC clients, obviously KYC has been an obligation for a regulatory requirement rather, for quite some time, and some enterprises do have their own internal risk assessment, risk rating procedures that they'd like to abide by, and have spent endless time and effort in curating and updating year after year. So we do have the KYC report in a no risk rating form, as you're seeing on the right-hand side. That actually just turns off the risk rating, the numerical risk rating in the upper right-hand corner. It turns off the risk bar that you would typically see, and it turns the risk category table into a binary. So blue or gray in terms of risk identified or risk not identified. You will still have the association summary with risk found, not found, as well as the ownership and control designations, as well as the country risk rating. It will just pull away that kind of risk rating so you can plug it into your process and make your own decisions upon what you see. In terms of the scopes for our reports, we spoke with a lot of clients about this. We spoke with a lot of our SMEs internally and what they want out of a KYC report. Now, the typical use case for when our clients come to Refinitiv within the KYC use case is the escalation of their high-risk clients, typically due to our language capabilities and to our data capabilities around the world. And so these scopes have basically been designated to scale up rather than scale down. So what you're looking at right here on the top axis, effectively, you're looking at the report type and the scope count. On the left-hand side is the primary subject, which in this case is the actual subject company. In the secondary subjects, it's the key principles related to that company. To state the obvious, all subjects within a report must be related to that subject company. So we offer a basic report, which effectively has a 2-day turnaround. It's based on one company and one individual. Now that, of course, can be scaled up when necessary. The differentiator for the basic report is that it pings all online sources, and so that means we'll go to anything that's available online immediately and pull the corporate information. We will also then defer to secondary sources if necessary. It provides a high-level view of ownership. You have a World Check screening of the parties identified in the report, as well as basic adverse media checks on that subject company. This is kind of an entry-level report to some extent. It still provides enough information to understand who your potential or existing client is. And we also conduct World Check screenings and basic adverse media research on the key principal, whether that's a founder, a CEO, whomever you choose to put into the report. I will stress that with all levels of our reports, they come with English language research and local language research. Now, as we escalate to a core level report, it's one company plus 2 individuals or 2 key principals. The core level includes all the basic elements, but the uplifts, per se, are the corporate registry info, and which includes full filings, all sources. If we have to go physically retrieve that filing, that's what we will do. The UBO information on the core level of the report is a 25% threshold. There's no limit on shareholder levels. There's no limit on the actual number of shareholders and shareholding parties that will drill down to identify the physical persons, as long as that information is readily available. We include litigation, bankruptcy, regulatory, and law enforcement data sources in this as well against the company, as well as an analysis of any client-provided documentation, so a kind of gap analysis as they provide KYC information, and you provide that to us. For the key principles, the secondary scopes, as you'll notice, are a little truncated, and that's because of the overlap between a primary subject company and a secondary subject key principle. So for the key principles involved, we'll delve through their employment history, positions, professional licenses, as well as reverse legal and directorship checks to see where they've been, what they've effectively have done. But due to the obvious overlap of a company and its key principles, we have a lesser scope for the secondary subjects that, of course, can be scaled up. When you get to the advanced level, let me stress for the core, that it's also adverse research specifically. When you get to the advanced level, you still have the same subject count. You get to full media research, which means comprehensive review and analysis in English and local language media sources pertaining to the risks for KYC. We actually start incorporating our third-party data sets here, so that's specific to the credit safe credit report, so you'll get your credit ratings in there, as well as your NGO action summary and detailed visualizations for ESG data. So that includes our partner SigWatch, which provides ESG data as in terms of who NGOs are targeting, what issues they're targeting, industries, and if they're going after a specific company, or if they're addressing issues with a specific company. Also, we include the security rating and metrics from our current cybersecurity data source partner, that is BitSite, which provides a high-level view on cybersecurity hygiene and provides a rating against that. For the secondary subject key principles in the advanced report as well, full media on that individual, full litigation, bankruptcy, regulatory, and law enforcement, and individual business interest checks within the scope. The premium scope adds business intelligence. Now, business intelligence is we have a curated international network of on-the-ground sources within former law enforcement, regulatory, and pertinent business communities that can get commentary on companies and individuals to provide details beyond what's available in the data. And so premium adds that on top to the advanced report. One more thing I'd like to add, this obviously clearly, it maps up to the risk categories we have, to the cover page we have. Moving to the entity verification report. Now this is a, let's say, watered down version to an extent of the KYC company report to provide a very targeted, concise due diligence report addressing the KYC regulatory requirements specifically. So what you'll see in these reports is an executive summary which offers a top-down narrative-driven description of the ownership structure of the subject company. We also supplement this on the front page by providing an ownership table which provides the UBOs by name, their percentage ownership, as well as any risks identified via a global compliance check, aka World Check. And we provide the level 1 of shareholders. So the information concerning the subject company and the people who effectively control that company, who drive that vehicle, which are your ultimate beneficial owners, which are your senior management officials, is all readily available on that front page. We also provide a screening of the subject company, of course, and then management screening. So we can break that away from the shareholdings. Now, clearly there's some overlap, but it's good to understand who's actually owning the company versus sometimes who's driving it, which can be entirely different. So these reports provide a concise, consolidated view of the company, in terms of background, in terms of their business activity, their company filing details, addresses, FKAs, a consolidated view in the body of the report of the actual current corporate registry filings, as well as the explicit identification of UBOs, once again, following the regulatory guidance around UBO thresholds being 25%, unlimited in terms of levels of shareholders or numbers of shareholders. We do have an add-on wherein you can basically uplift the threshold to 10% or 5% if you would like, obviously at an incremental cost. Once again, this reviews the contents of the report and what it explicitly includes. The turnaround on these entity verification reports are 5 to 7 business days. We also have the ability to include proofs in the report as well as attached to the report for those who require that for audit trail purposes. That is true for KYC, the more robust company report as well, and the ability to uplift that UBO threshold based on your internal risk parameters and what you're looking for in terms of ownership. Now, something we spent a lot of time uplifting and something that take quite a dramatic, evolution from our previous offering is the source of wealth report. Now, the source of wealth report effectively looks at the primary subject is an individual, and it looks into their financial profile and how they've generated wealth over time. And what does that mean? Oftentimes in our previous reports were far more narrative driven because source of wealth, by nature of the research and by nature of the people who we typically have to conduct research on, oftentimes high net worth individuals. They've been in multiple countries. They have multiple business endeavors. They have potentially generational wealth that contributes to their overall financial profile. It took some time to look at this from a view of how do we contextualize a source of wealth report and make it digestible, which is our goal for most of our reports. Our cover page should be a ready reference in terms of risk and regulatory requirements, and should arguably be the place you decide you can look at and determine what you need, when you need it, and what it means for you and your enterprise. So what we've endeavored to do with the source of wealth report is provide an estimated net worth. Now, we have designated ranges I'll show you in the next slide, but I'm going to go through the cover page first for a better understanding. So an executive summary that allows for a prose-driven narrative of the individual to explain who they are, where they're from, what they've done, and what effectively contributes to their wealth and the risks involved. We also include the estimated net worth, as you'll see in the upper right-hand corner. Right now, it's a word that also applies to a monetary range that's in the appendix of the report. We'll likely bring the monetary range up under the classification of their worth as well, just so it's more ready reference than it already is right now. We've also included a source of wealth findings table. Now, what we've done here is we've basically broken down an individual's source of wealth, especially for high net worth individuals, into what we're calling asset classes, which I'll run through in a minute. So it's 6 asset classes, which then map to certain monetary ranges. So as we go through each asset and as we're conducting our research, we'll tag it with a asset class and a corresponding valuation based on the information available, and apply that kind of that classification within that monetary range. On the cover page, we also have the risk finding summary, which also maps up to our risk classification taxonomy in terms of what was identified for that individual. So it's ready reference as well. Clearly being next to the source of wealth and supplemented by the executive summary to understand your risk with this high net worth individual, if any. We're including an association summary, which includes individuals and companies associated with that individual, whether it's family, close business associates, or their actual business entities. And we have a sources summary, just so you know where it's coming from and why. Just for a closer look at the source of wealth report and how we're doing these classifications. We've broken it down to 6 asset classes in terms of source of wealth findings. So it's career and earnings, or enumerations, however you want to refer to that, directorships, business interests, which are typically lie outside their career and directorships, but also can overlap to some extent, family assets, real estate assets, and other assets. Now, the way we thought about this is obviously these different asset classes have different meanings. If you have a high net worth individual that is from a low information jurisdiction with a low media profile, so you're unable to effectively corroborate, say, career and earnings, but you can see their real estate assets are through the roof or other assets are through the roof, that will effectively inform you that maybe additional research needs to be done, or maybe they need to be flagged as high risk, so you can determine how that looks for you and your effective your risk management program. We've also built out classifications and ranges. So the current ranges right now go from unable to determine for obvious reasons to minimal through very significant. These asset classes and classifications and ranges are effectively informed by the research we've conducted by looking at our reports and how our clients use us for our legacy source of wealth reports, as well as IMF guidance around these specific classifications and ranges, as well as asset classes. As I also alluded to earlier, as we basically identify an asset for an individual, we tag that asset. In the report, we explain what it is, what its valuation was, how that was determined, apply that monetary value, and this all aggregates to the front page. So as you go through the body of the report, you'll be able to see each individual asset for those respective asset classes and its valuation, which then aggregates to this table on the front page, and it aggregates the estimated net worth entirely. So pretty ready reference. You can get an idea of where an individual's wealth is coming from and effectively what it means for you and your enterprise. Just to give you an idea of what that looks like and the data points that contribute to source of wealth, we have 3 levels as identified by the top axis. On the left-hand side, we have the 3 primary KYC risks that pertain to an individual, and that's identity/ownership, integrity, and any financial risk. So within your core version of the report, which is your kind of entry-level version, you'll get full comprehensive media checks. We'll dig into employment history, positions, licenses, directorship checks, and a listing of relatives and close associates to give you a better idea of who this individual is dealing with. And also it provides additional threads to pull on in terms of determining wealth. We also provide role check screenings. Those are included on the individual RCAs identified, their relatives and close associates, as well as the individual and certain business and their business interests identified. For the financial aspect of it, that pertains to the media and internet research, of course. And this, I will say, also comes, the entry level includes English language research and local language research. Financial also digs into individual business interest checks, as well as real estate assets, of course, are best to determine do a valuation and monetary value and classify it within the scheme we've just presented. This is all presented, obviously, in an executive summary based on that scope. When you go to the advanced level, you'll see there's additional data points added, so the core scope is included, but we basically build upon the relatives and close associates review, so we dig into short biographies on who these relatives and close associates are, and a high-level view on what they do and what their media profiles provide in terms of wealth and risk. We actually up the role check screenings as well. Litigation, bankruptcy, regulatory, law enforcement, that's included at the core level, but it's also included at advanced, so it gives you an idea. Although litigation, that doesn't necessarily prove wealth, it does kind of give you a commentary on things that detract from wealth, or things that demonstrate business principles and things that could effectively, let's say, change the wealth portrait of an individual over time based on their business interests. When we get to the financial aspect, the addition here is other assets. There's obviously a variety of things in this category, from the easiest thing that comes to mind are yachts and boats and things of that effect, but other assets that contribute to their wealth and are obvious. The premium level is advanced, but just includes business intelligence. So in most of our source of wealth customers order the legacy premium, which effectively includes business intelligence. So we have on-the-ground curated sources with pertinent knowledge of the individual, of their businesses, and are typically former law enforcement, former intelligence community, and folks within the pertinent business communities to provide on-the-ground commentary for that individual. So we have another survey, and this pertains to the source of wealth. So we're most interested in, when conducting KYC on an individual, specific to source of wealth, what piece of their financial profile do you consider to be the most important? And Hattie, I'm not necessarily sure how we activate the survey or if it's already active.
That's already active, so you can go ahead and start selecting.
Great, thank you. Let's give it another 30 seconds here. And all right, let's see the results, see what matters to your KYC programs in terms of source of wealth. Interesting. So career and earnings, which makes sense, business interests, and other effectively lead the pack. Luckily, career earnings, I would argue in terms of source of wealth research methodology, we do look through the professional lens to start determining, if their career and their earnings are commensurate with their wealth profile, which obviously leads to business interests. But that's good to know. Thank you for your participation in that. So in terms of kind of summing up the benefits around KYC due diligence reports, the goal here is to answer the question, what does due diligence mean? And furthermore, what does due diligence mean in a KYC context for me? So as we evolve the business, and Andrew laid out the plan going forward, we're taking what used to be due diligence generally is more source driven. A lot of reports you'll find from our competitors and at one point from ourselves provides data points like litigation, regulatory proceedings, negative media on X, Y, and Z. But in this case, we're taking that and providing this risk contextualization specific to KYC to provide a ready reference, risk cover page that explicitly shows you your risk, and in this case, your KYC regulatory requirements around ownership and control of your potential or existing client. Also, just generally to speak to Refinitiv and our overall benefits and kind of differentiators. We've been around doing for 20 plus years of collective experience, if not more, with RFG. Now we're international with trusted and curated data sources for insights in 200 plus jurisdictions. I would definitely like to note that as we build out our risk taxonomy and look at that further, we're on a daily basis actively speaking with third-party data partners to further enhance the data we have so we can continue to not only deepen but widen the availability of data across risks and that apply to those risks and sub-risk vectors as well as different subjects, industries, you name it, that's what we're aiming for. And we're specifically focused with this use case on AML KYC. So it's not a general use application. These reports have been designed to target AML KYC concerns like identity, integrity, and financial risks. Furthermore, we're working on technological enablements like an end-to-end platform for easy ordering, ease of access to the reports as well. And with these technological advancements on the front end as well as on the back end with workflow tools, we're looking to develop faster turnaround times than we currently have or even presented in these reports. So thank you for your time, and I guess we'll go to the Q&A portion of the presentation.
Okay, Nick, I've got one question coming in, just asking about timing. When will these changes happen?
These reports actually went live on Monday. So these reports are readily available to order for new clients. If you're an existing client and you'd like to walk through it, because for KYC existing clients, we will be talking to you, and we've talked to most of you so far. But the reports are live and ready to order as of Monday, this past Monday, actually.
Okay, great. There's another question here. How would you set up a KYC process for a US law firm that has an office in the UK? The KYC requirements differ between the two. Namely, there's no requirement to complete the same KYC AML checks as in the UK. And how would Refinitiv assist to bridge that gap?
We can essentially, work with you on that to see what your specific concerns are. Now, clearly, we would have our set kind of risk taxonomy, but we can work with you in terms of what thresholds are necessary in terms of your KYC parameters. In any given situation, I used to work at an international law firm, and we often defer to the most, let's say, robust kind of KYC AML procedures and then applied that across jurisdictions. But we can definitely work with you one-on-one to customize reports to fulfill your regulatory needs. So effectively, a conversation with us is a good place to start, and we can definitely curtail these reports, and they're built for that purpose, to your KYC AML regulatory needs.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. Where do we go for more information? It's a fairly broad question there.
Yeah, do we have we can, at the end of this webinar, we'll distribute an email which will have how to get in contact. We'll have our website information as well to reach out so we can start a discussion, certainly. There will be a feedback survey, I believe, which should provide contact information, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, that's the end of the questions that have come in, but please send us any questions after the session if you have anything else that comes to mind. I think that's all from us. And then, Hattie, do you want to sort of close out the session?
Thank you, Andrew. That is the end of the webinar. We hope you enjoyed today's session. Before we conclude, please could you take a moment to answer the short survey that will appear on the right side of your screen. We really value your input there. Thank you again to Andrew and Nick for your time and interest today. The event is now concluded, and thank you to the audience for joining.